In the vast expanse of a galaxy, where 1,000 civilizations bow before the ancient ones who seeded the stars with life, there exists a forbidden question that no species dares to ask. For millions of years, every sentient being has accepted their place in the cosmic hierarchy, knowing their creators walk among the stars as living gods. But when a small alien child catches an unfamiliar scent drifting from a strange, new species called humans, everything changes. That innocent question, "Why do you smell that way?" followed by a whispered answer that defies every law of creation, will shatter the foundation of galactic civilization. Because sometimes the most dangerous truth isn't that gods exist. It's discovering that some of their children grew up to become something more than what they were meant to be. The humans smell like their creators not because they worship them, but because they share the same ancient essence. And when the galaxy learns what humanity truly is, the carefully constructed order of eons will crumble in a single, terrifying revelation. This is the story of that moment. The moment everything changed. The marketplace of Station Kepler buzzed with the familiar symphony of 1,000 different languages, the clicking of arachnoid traders, the harmonic hums of the crystalline merchants, and the deep, rumbling conversations of the massive stonekin. But today, something felt different. Ambassador Calera of the Veiltar Confederation found herself distracted as she moved through the crowded corridors, her elongated limbs carrying her gracefully between the stalls selling exotic goods from across the galaxy. Her daughter, Zixi, bounded beside her on all 6 legs, her natural curiosity making her dart between the various alien forms that populated the trading station. At barely 7 cycles old, Zixi possessed the boundless energy and innocent questions that made every parent both proud and exhausted. Her large, multifaceted eyes sparkled with wonder as she took in the sights and sounds of the diverse marketplace. "Mama, why do the crystalline ones sing when they walk?" Zixi asked, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of their species. "Because their movements create harmonics in their crystalline bodies, little starlight. Each step is like playing a note," Calera explained patiently, having answered similar questions throughout their journey to this remote station. Station Kepler was unlike any other trading post in their sector. It served as a neutral meeting ground for species that rarely interacted, a place where the strict hierarchies of galactic civilization relaxed just enough to allow for commerce and limited cultural exchange. The station's artificial gravity accommodated dozens of different species requirements, creating zones where each could function comfortably. As they moved deeper into the market, Calera noticed the subtle shift in atmosphere that always accompanied the arrival of a new species to any gathering. Conversations had taken on a hushed quality, and many beings were stealing glances toward the central plaza. Her own curiosity piqued. She guided Zixi toward the source of the disturbance. That's when she first caught the scent. It hit her like a physical force, stopping her mid-stride. The smell was impossible, forbidden, and yet undeniably real. Her breathing quickened, and she felt her secondary hearts begin to race. It was the scent of the Makers, the ancient ones who had seeded the galaxy with life eons ago. Every species knew that smell from the deepest levels of their genetic memory, encoded into their very DNA as a recognition signal for their creators. But the Makers had disappeared millions of years ago, ascending to higher planes of existence. They existed now only in the most sacred temples and the most ancient artifacts. To smell their presence here, in a common trading station, was impossible. "Mama, your colors are changing," Zixi observed, watching as Calera's naturally shifting chromatophore patterns became rapid and erratic, betraying her emotional state. Calera forced herself to calm down, bringing her color changes under control. "I'm fine, little one. I just thought I smelled something familiar." They moved closer to the central plaza, where a crowd had gathered around what appeared to be first contact protocols being initiated. Station security maintained a perimeter while translation matrices were being calibrated. In the center of the commotion stood beings unlike any Calera had ever seen. They walked upright on two legs, a relatively uncommon trait in the galaxy, but not unprecedented. Their skin lacked fur, scales, or any of the typical protective coverings most species possessed. Instead, they seemed to be covered in some sort of artificial skin that they called clothing. Their faces were remarkably expressive, with small eyes that seemed to take in everything around them with an intensity that was almost unsettling. But it was their scent that continued to overwhelm Kalera's senses. The smell of the makers clung to them like an aura, not as if they had been in the presence of ancient artifacts, but as if they themselves carried that divine essence. The humans have requested permission to establish trade relations, announced Commander Thexel, the station's reptoid administrator. They claim to come from a system designated as Sol, approximately 26,000 light-years from Galactic Center. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sol's system was in the Outer Rim, a region considered barely worth exploring. Most civilizations in that area were primitive, having only recently developed space travel. The fact that a species from such a backwater region had made it to Station Kepler was impressive, but hardly cause for the level of attention they were receiving. Zixi, unable to see over the crowd due to her small stature, tugged at her mother's ceremonial robes. "Mama, I can't see. What do they look like?" Kalera lifted her daughter, positioning her on her shoulders where she could see over the assembled beings. Zixi's gasp of delight was audible even over the crowd noise. "They look so strange. They're all different colors, and they don't have any proper covering. Are they sick?" "No, little one. That appears to be their natural state. Every species is different." As they watched, one of the humans stepped forward. The translation matrix had apparently finished its calibration, as his words came through clearly in Galactic Standard. "Greetings, beings of Station Kepler. I am Captain Marcus Chun of the Earth vessel New Horizon. We come seeking peaceful contact and trade opportunities with the galactic community." The human's confidence was striking. Most species, when making first contact with galactic civilization, exhibited proper deference to their place in the cosmic order. They acknowledged the superiority of the elder races and requested permission to prove their worthiness for inclusion in civilized society. This human showed respect, but there was something in his bearing that suggested he saw this as a meeting of equals rather than a supplication to his betters. Elder Counselor Vextahar of the Hegemony Council stepped forward, his massive form towering over the human delegation. The ancient being's carapace gleamed with age and wisdom markings, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had overseen first contact protocols for over 3 centuries. "Welcome, humans of Sol System. I am Elder Counselor Vextahar. According to our records, your system falls under the administrative oversight of the Altarian Collective. Have you received proper authorization from your sector governors for this contact?" Captain Chin's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew sharper. "With respect, Elder Counselor, we don't recognize any authority over our system except our own. Earth governs Earth, and we speak for ourselves." A shocked silence fell over the plaza. Zixi felt her mother's grip tighten around her legs, and she noticed that many of the adults around them had changed color or posture in ways that suggested extreme surprise or concern. "That's impossible," Elder Counselor Vextahar rumbled, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "All inhabited systems in your sector were cataloged and assigned to appropriate oversight millennia ago. The Altarians have maintained careful records of their protectorate species." "Perhaps your records are incomplete," Captain Chin replied calmly. "We've had no contact with any Altarian collective, nor do we have any knowledge of being anyone's protectorate. As far as we know, we've been alone in the universe until now." The crowd erupted in excited chatter. The implications of what the human was saying were staggering. An entire star system, with apparently advanced spacefaring capability, that had somehow escaped notice by the galactic community was unprecedented. More concerning was their apparent ignorance of the proper order of things. Kalera found herself studying the humans more intently. There were 12 of them in the delegation, and they displayed remarkable diversity even within their own species. Their skin tones ranged from very pale to very dark, Their facial features varied dramatically, and even their body types showed significant variation. Yet they all carried that same impossible scent. "Mama," Zixi whispered, "why do they smell like that?" The question, asked in her daughter's clear, innocent voice, seemed to cut through all the political complications of the moment. Calera had been wondering the same thing, but hearing it voiced by her child made the impossibility of it even more stark. "I don't know, little starlight. I don't know." Elder Counselor Vextahar was continuing his interrogation of the human delegation. "Captain Shun, surely your species must have some record of your origins? All civilized species maintain histories of their creation by the makers. Where are your temples? Your sacred sites? Your records of the gifts given to your people by the Ancient Ones?" Captain Chun exchanged glances with several members of his delegation before answering. "I'm afraid I don't understand what you mean by makers or Ancient Ones. Could you clarify?" The silence that followed this question was deafening. Calera felt her world tilt slightly, as if the artificial gravity had suddenly shifted. Around the plaza, beings who had lived for centuries found themselves speechless. Zixi, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand its source, pressed closer to her mother's head. "The makers," Vextahar said slowly, as if explaining something to a very young child, "are the Ancient Ones who created all life in the galaxy. Every species, every world, every form of consciousness was designed and planted by them. They are our gods, our creators, the source of all existence. Surely your people must have some knowledge of this." Captain Chin's expression grew thoughtful rather than enlightened. "We have many theories about the origin of life on our world, but none of them involve outside intervention. Our scientific evidence suggests that life on Earth evolved naturally over billions of years." Evolved. The word came from several beings simultaneously, spoken in tones of shock and confusion. "Natural selection, adaptation to environment, gradual change over geological time," Chin explained. "Our fossil record shows a clear progression from simple organisms to complex life forms, including our own species." Elder Counselor Vextahar's massive form seemed to sway slightly. "You're claiming that your species created itself." "Not created. Evolved. We developed naturally from earlier life forms, which developed from even earlier forms, going back billions of years to the first self-replicating molecules." The theological implications of what the human was saying hit the crowd like a wave. Every species in the galaxy knew their origin story. They had been created by the makers, given specific gifts and abilities, and placed on worlds prepared for them. The makers had then departed, leaving behind only their scent signature in the most sacred artifacts, and the genetic memory of their divine presence. But these humans claim to have no makers at all. "This is heresy," someone shouted from the crowd, though the universal translator couldn't identify the speaker. "This is impossible," said another. Calera found herself caught between her trained diplomatic mind, which was analyzing the political ramifications of this revelation, and her more primitive brain, which was still reeling from the scent that continued to emanate from the human delegation. "Mama," Zixi asked again, her voice smaller now, "why do they smell like the gods?" The question hung in the air, and Calera realized that her daughter had just asked the most important question of the day. If these humans had no knowledge of the makers, no connection to the Ancient Ones, no understanding of their place in the cosmic order, then why did they carry the scent of divinity itself? Captain Shun, apparently possessing excellent hearing, had caught Zixi's question. He looked up at the small alien child perched on her mother's shoulders, his expression curious rather than offended. "Did she ask why we smell like gods?" he asked, addressing Calera directly. Calera's translator worked frantically to convert her species' complex language of colors, sounds, and chemical signals into something the human could understand. "She asked why you smell like our creators, the ones who made us all." Chen's expression grew thoughtful, and he consulted briefly with his delegation. When he turned back, his eyes held a strange mixture of curiosity and something that might have been concern. What exactly do we smell like to you? Like the makers, Calera replied, her diplomatic training warring with her growing sense that this conversation was heading somewhere dangerous. Like the ancient ones who seeded the galaxy with life. Every species recognizes their scent from genetic memory. The human delegation exchanged more glances, and Calera noticed that several of them seemed to be having an urgent, quiet discussion using some form of gestural communication that bypassed the translation systems. Captain, one of the humans said, a woman with darker skin and short black hair, we need to discuss this privately. But Chin shook his head. Dr. Okafor, I think we're past the point of private discussions. He turned back to address the crowd. I want to make sure I understand correctly. You're saying that every species here was created by beings called the Makers or Ancient Ones? Yes, Vextahar confirmed. Every sentient species in the galaxy. We all carry genetic markers that identify us as their children, and we all recognize their presence through scent signature. And you're saying we smell like these creators? Exactly like them, Calera found herself saying, though she hadn't intended to speak. As if you were them. The human delegation went very still. Even from her distance, Calera could see that this information was causing some sort of crisis among them. Captain Chin's expression had become unreadable, and the woman he had called Dr. Okafor was staring at him with something that looked like alarm. Captain Chun, Elder Counselor Vextahar, said formally, I request that your delegation submit to standard biological scanning so that we may properly identify your origins and place in the galactic order. Chin was quiet for a long moment before responding. Elder Counselor, I'm not sure that would be wise. Why not? Demanded someone from the crowd. All species must be properly categorized. How else can we maintain proper social order? Because, Chun said slowly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent plaza, I suspect the results would be disturbing to your current understanding of the universe. Zixi shifted on her mother's shoulders, pressing her small hands against Calera's head for balance. Her young voice, amplified by the translation systems, cut through the tension with devastating clarity. Mama, if they smell like the gods who made us, but they don't know about the gods who made us, then maybe they're the gods who made us. The simplicity of the child's logic hit the assembled beings like a physical blow. Around the plaza, representatives from dozens of species found themselves confronting a possibility that challenged everything they believed about their place in the universe. Captain Chin looked up at the small alien child and nodded slowly. That's a very intelligent observation, young lady. What's your name? Zixi, the child replied proudly. Are you gods? No, Chin said gently. We're just people, like you. But I think we might need to have a very long conversation about where we all came from. The emergency session of the Station Kepler Diplomatic Council convened in the largest conference chamber available. But even that space felt cramped with representatives from 47 different species crammed into every available space. The humans sat at a central table, surrounded by a complex array of translation equipment, biological scanners, and what appeared to be several different types of recording devices. Calera found herself assigned as the Veiltar Confederation's primary observer, a role that would normally fill her with professional pride. Instead, she felt only growing dread as the implications of the day's revelations continued to sink in. Zixi sat quietly beside her, having been granted special permission to remain as the one who had first voiced the critical question. Elder Counselor Vextahar called the session to order with traditional formalities, but his usual commanding presence seemed diminished. The massive being's carapace had lost some of its luster, and his voice carried an uncertainty that Calera had never heard before. Captain Chun, Vextahar began, the results of your biological scans have been unprecedented. Before we share them with this council, I must ask again, are you certain your people have no knowledge of the Ancient Ones? No creation myths that speak of outside intervention? No religious traditions that acknowledge divine makers? Chin remained calm under the intense scrutiny of dozens of alien eyes. Elder Counselor, we have many creation myths and religious traditions, but none that match what you've described. Our scientific consensus is that life on Earth developed through natural processes. We have fossil evidence, genetic markers, and geological data that supports this conclusion. Dr. Okafor, who had been introduced as the expedition's xenoarchaeologist and historian, leaned forward. However, I should note that Captain Shin asked me to review our historical records in light of today's discussions. There are some anomalies in our early history that we've never been able to explain satisfactorily. What kind of anomalies? Asked Counselor Yaira of the aquatic domains, her translation device making her underwater speech comprehensible to the air-breathing majority. Sudden leaps in technological development, the appearance of advanced knowledge in multiple isolated populations simultaneously, and some archaeological sites that don't fit our understanding of human capability at the time they were constructed, Dr. Okafor explained. We've generally attributed these to gaps in our historical record, but given current circumstances, we might need to reconsider our interpretations. Bioanalyst Kree Thun, a spindly creature whose species specialized in genetic archaeology, activated his display screen with a gesture of one of his 6 manipulator arms. The scans we performed are conclusive. The humans carry genetic markers that are identical to those found in the most sacred artifacts of the Ancient Ones. Not similar. Identical. A murmur ran through the assembly. Kalera felt Zixi press closer to her side, the child's natural empathy picking up on the adult's distress, even if she couldn't understand the technical details being discussed. Furthermore, Kree Thun continued, they carry what we would classify as prime genetic markers, the base template from which all other species appear to have been derived. Every sentient species in the galaxy carries modified versions of these same genetic sequences, but the humans carry the original, unmodified versions. The silence that followed was deafening. Kalera found her secondary hearts racing again as she processed what the bioanalyst was saying. If the humans carried the original genetic template and all other species carried modified versions, then the logical conclusion was impossible to accept. Are you suggesting, said Magistrate Korix of the Silicon Collective, his crystalline form resonating with harmonics that suggested deep disturbance, that these humans are the Ancient Ones themselves? No, Captain Shin said firmly, drawing all attention back to him. We are not gods, and we are not your creators, but I think we might be able to shed some light on what actually happened. Dr. Okafor opened a portable data storage device and projected a 3-dimensional star map into the center of the chamber. This is our galaxy as we understand it, based on our astronomical observations and the data you've provided about galactic civilization. The map showed the familiar spiral structure, with the core world at the center and the various sectors spreading outward. Earth's position was highlighted in the outer rim, an unremarkable yellow star in what most galactic citizens considered the cosmic equivalent of a rural backwater. Now, this is the same map showing the distribution of sentient species as you've described it to us, Dr. Okafor continued. The display changed, showing clusters of civilized worlds throughout the galaxy, but with notable gaps in certain regions. Do you notice anything interesting about the pattern? Kalera studied the display, her diplomat's training helping her analyze complex data presentations. After a moment, she saw it. The distribution isn't random. The civilized worlds form a rough sphere, expanding outward from the galactic core. Exactly. And if we plot the estimated development dates of each species based on your historical records, the display changed again, showing the same distribution, but with color coding for time periods. We see a clear pattern of expansion over time, moving outward from the core. Elder Counselor Vextahar's massive form shifted as he leaned forward to study the display. You're suggesting that the Ancient Ones seeded the galaxy systematically, starting from the core and working outward. That's one interpretation, Dr. Okafor agreed. But there's another possibility. What if what you call seeding was actually something else entirely? Captain Shun took over the presentation. Dr. Okafor showed them the genetic analysis comparison. The display changed to show complex genetic sequences, with color coding to highlight similarities and differences. Even without specialized training in genetics, the pattern was clear. All the galactic species shared common base sequences, but each had unique modifications that appeared to be purposeful rather than evolutionary. According to your own data, Chun said, every species in the galaxy shares approximately 92% genetic similarity with what you call the ancient template. The differences appear to be adaptations for specific environments and evolutionary pressures, which supports the creation hypothesis, Magistrate Corix pointed out. The makers designed each species for their intended worlds. Or, Chun said quietly, it supports a different hypothesis entirely. What if your species weren't created by outside gods, but were modified by them? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Calera felt her world tilt again as the implications hit her. Zixi looked up at her with large, confused eyes. Mama, what does modified mean? Before Calera could answer, Dr. Okafor changed the display again. This time it showed Earth, but not as it appeared now. The image was of a world covered in ice, with small pockets of liquid water and primitive landmasses. This is Earth approximately 70,000 years ago, she explained. Our planet went through a period of extreme climate change that nearly caused the extinction of our species. The human population dropped to perhaps 10,000 individuals, scattered across small pockets of habitable territory. The image changed, showing the gradual warming of the planet and the expansion of human populations across the continents. But we survived and we spread across our world, developing different physical characteristics based on our environments. Some populations developed darker skin for protection against intense sunlight. Others developed different facial features, body types, even different metabolisms for different climates. Calera began to understand where this was heading, and the realization filled her with a cold dread. What you're seeing, Chin continued, is natural evolution in action. One base species, adapting to different environments, becoming variants of the original while maintaining the core genetic template. Now, Dr. Okafor said, imagine that some members of our species left Earth during our early development. Imagine they had advanced technology that allowed them to travel between stars, to find suitable worlds, and to establish colonies. The display changed again, showing hypothetical travel routes spreading outward from Earth's position toward the core worlds of galactic civilization. Imagine that these early human travelers found worlds with different environmental challenges and used their advanced technology to accelerate the natural evolutionary process, modifying themselves and their descendants to better survive on each new world. Bioanalyst Kree Thun's manipulator arms were moving frantically as he processed the implications. You're suggesting that all galactic species are descended from early human colonists who used advanced genetic modification to adapt to different worlds? I'm not suggesting it, Chun said grimly. I'm stating it as the most likely explanation for the data we've been shown. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species began speaking, shouting, and, in some cases, making sounds that the translation systems couldn't process. Calera found herself caught between her analytical mind, which recognized the logic of the human explanation, and her emotional core, which recoiled from the implications. This is impossible. Elder Counselor Vextahar roared, his voice cutting through the cacophony. We have records. We have temples. We have artifacts left by the Ancient Ones. Do you? Dr. Okafor asked calmly. Or do you have artifacts left by the first human colonists who came to your worlds? She gestured, and the display changed to show images that had been provided by various species of their most sacred artifacts. Golden discs covered in strange symbols, crystalline structures that resonated with harmonic frequencies, metal alloys that seemed to defy conventional physics. Captain Chen showed these images to our expedition archaeologist, Dr. Martinez, who specializes in ancient human cultures. Dr. Martinez, would you share your analysis? A young human male stood up, his expression troubled. The symbols on these artifacts, many of them are recognizable as early human writing systems. Not exactly the same, but close enough to suggest common origins. The mathematical concepts, the astronomical references, the technological principles, they're all consistent with what we know about early human scientific understanding. Furthermore, he continued, the materials science involved in creating these artifacts is advanced, but not impossible. It's consistent with what a spacefaring human civilization might have been capable of 70,000 years ago. Counselor Yaira of the aquatic domains rose from her specialized water-filled seat. You're claiming that our gods were simply early versions of your species? That our entire religious and social structure is based on a misunderstanding? Captain Chen's expression grew compassionate. I'm suggesting that your ancestors were human colonists who modified themselves to survive in aquatic environments. The technology they used would have seemed godlike to less advanced populations, but they weren't gods. They were people trying to survive and build new lives on new worlds. Then, where are they now? Demanded Magistrate Corix. Why did they disappear? Why did they leave no record of their true nature? Dr. Okafor and Captain Chun exchanged a look that suggested they had been dreading this question. We think, Chun said slowly, that something went wrong. The display changed again, showing a timeline of galactic history based on the archaeological evidence that had been presented. The pattern was clear: advanced civilizations appearing suddenly, flourishing for thousands of years, then declining and eventually disappearing, leaving behind only their modified descendants. Every world shows the same pattern, Dr. Okafor explained. Advanced colonists arrive, establish thriving settlements, begin the process of adapting the local population to the environment, and then vanish, sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly, but always completely. We think, Chun said, that the original human colonists died out. Whether from plague, environmental catastrophe, war, or simple genetic isolation, they disappeared, leaving behind only the populations they had been modifying. And those populations, Dar, Okafor continued, having lost contact with their origins and lacking the advanced technology of their predecessors, eventually mythologized them as gods. Zixi, who had been listening with the intense focus that children sometimes display when trying to understand adult conversations, suddenly spoke up. So the gods who made us were really just people like us, but they died and left us alone? The innocent simplicity of the child's summary cut through all the complex scientific and theological implications like a blade. Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species found themselves confronting the possibility that their entire understanding of their place in the universe was wrong. Yes, little one, Captain Chin said gently. That's what we think happened. But why do you smell like them if they're all dead? Chin smiled sadly. Because we're what they were before they left Earth. We're the ones who stayed behind. The aftermath of the revelation spread across Station Kepler like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Within hours, emergency communications were being transmitted to home worlds across the galaxy. Religious leaders were demanding explanations. Scientists were requesting detailed data analyses. Politicians were calculating the implications for existing power structures. Calera found herself appointed as the primary liaison between the human delegation and the various species representatives, a role that placed her at the center of the growing crisis. She had moved her quarters to be closer to the diplomatic wing, and Zixi had been granted special educational privileges that allowed her to attend the ongoing discussions as a cultural observer. The child seemed to be handling the cosmic revelations better than most of the adults. Mama, Zixi said as they prepared for another day of sessions, if the humans are our cousins, why do all the adults seem so upset? Isn't it good to find family? Calera paused in her morning color-matching routine, a daily ritual that helped her maintain proper diplomatic appearance. Her daughter's question highlighted something that the political and religious implications had overshadowed: the simple, profound fact that humanity had just revealed itself to be the lost family of every sentient species in the galaxy. It's complicated, little Starlight. Sometimes learning new things means we have to change how we think about old things. But that's good, isn't it? Learning new things. Usually, yes. But sometimes adults have built their whole lives around believing certain things, and changing those beliefs feels scary. As if to prove her point, Raised voices could be heard from the corridor outside their quarters. The Hegemony Council was fracturing along ideological lines, with some members demanding that the human claims be verified independently, while others insisted that such verification would constitute blasphemy against the Ancient Ones. When they arrived at the conference chamber, Calera found the atmosphere even more tense than the previous day. Several species representatives had departed during the night, claiming they needed to consult with their home governments. Others had been joined by additional delegates, including what appeared to be religious authorities and military advisors. Captain Chun and his delegation looked tired but determined. They had spent the night in intensive discussions with various scientific committees, providing detailed data about Earth's history, human genetics, and their theories about early human expansion into space. The crystalline hegemony has completed their independent analysis of the genetic data, announced Elder Counselor Vextahar, his voice lacking its usual authority. Bioanalyst Kree Thun, please present your findings. The spindly scientist activated his display screen, showing complex genetic comparisons that made even Calera's trained diplomatic mind struggle to follow the technical details. The human genetic template is confirmed as identical to what we have designated as the ancient template, Kree Thun reported. However, our analysis has revealed additional information that complicates the human's hypothesis. Captain Shin leaned forward. What kind of complications? The genetic modifications present in the various galactic species are not random adaptations. They show clear evidence of deliberate design, using technology far beyond what we would expect from a primitive spacefaring civilization. Dr. Okafor frowned. Can you be more specific? Kree Thun manipulated his display, showing detailed genetic sequences with highlighted sections. The modifications include engineered resistance to specific diseases that don't exist naturally, metabolic optimizations for consuming food sources that weren't present on the original worlds, and sensory adaptations for environmental conditions that wouldn't have developed naturally for millions of years. You're saying the modifications were too advanced for early humans to have created? Dr. Martinez asked. Precisely. The level of genetic engineering involved suggests technology that surpasses even our current capabilities. An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Calera could see that the human delegation was processing this information with visible concern. There's more, Kree Thun continued. We've detected what appear to be artificial genetic markers embedded in all species, including humans. These markers seem to be some form of identification system. Identification for what? Captain Shin asked. Unknown. But the markers are active. They're not dormant genetic artifacts. They're continuously generating some form of quantum-level signal. Dr. Okafor's face had gone pale. You're saying that every sentient being in the galaxy is broadcasting some kind of signal, continuously, including your delegation, Captain Chun. Zixi tugged at her mother's robes. Mama, what does that mean? Before Calera could answer, Counselor Yaira of the aquatic domain spoke up. It means someone or something is tracking every sentient being in the galaxy. And if the humans are correct about their origins, then that tracking system was put in place by their ancestors. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Captain Chin stood up slowly, his expression grim. Dr. Okafor, I need you to contact the New Horizon immediately. Tell them to run a full scan on our quantum signature generators. Sir, our quantum generators are what allow us to communicate across interstellar distances. If there's something wrong with them, just do it. As Dr. Okafor began working with her communication equipment, Elder Counselor Vextahar addressed the chamber with obvious reluctance. There is additional information that the Council has been debating whether to share. In light of these revelations, we believe you must be informed. He gestured, and the chamber's main display activated, showing a star chart unlike any Calera had ever seen. Instead of the familiar galaxy with its spiral arms and scattered civilizations, this map showed vast empty spaces punctuated by what appear to be control zones. This is the galaxy as our most advanced surveys actually show it, Vextahar explained. What we call galactic civilization actually occupies less than 8% of available habitable systems. Captain Chun stared at the display. Where is everyone else? We don't know. The surveys show that most star systems contain worlds that should be capable of supporting life, but are completely uninhabited. No signs of current civilization, no archaeological evidence of past civilizations, no indication that complex life ever evolved. Magistrate Corix's crystalline form resonated with harmonics that the translators rendered as deep concern. The pattern suggests that something is actively preventing the development of life in most of the galaxy, or actively removing it, Counselor Yaira added grimly. Dr. Okafor looked up from her communication equipment, her expression troubled. Captain, the New Horizon confirms that our quantum generators are producing an unidentified secondary signal. They can't shut it down without losing all interstellar communication capability. It's not just unidentified, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. It's a location beacon. Everyone turned to see a figure that should have been impossible. Standing in the doorway was another human, but this one was different in subtle ways that made Kalera's trained eye immediately notice the discrepancies. The proportions were slightly off, the movements too fluid, and the eyes held an intelligence that seemed older than the apparent physical age. Who are you? Captain Chun demanded, his hand moving instinctively toward what Kalera now realized was probably a weapon. I'm Dr. Sarachen, and before you ask, yes, I'm related to you, Captain Marcus Chen. I'm your great-great-great-granddaughter, though from a timeline that doesn't exist anymore. The figure smiled, and Kalera noticed that the expression didn't quite reach those ancient eyes. I'm here to explain what really happened to the early human colonists, and why you're all in terrible danger. Zixi pressed closer to her mother, her empathic senses clearly detecting the shift in the room's emotional atmosphere. Mama, she smells wrong. Wrong how, little one? She smells like the humans, but also like something else. Something that makes my skin feel funny. Dr. Sarah Chin's expression grew approving. Very perceptive, child. Yes, I smell different because I'm not entirely human anymore. None of the original colonists were by the end. She walked into the chamber, and Kalera noticed that several of the assembled representatives were unconsciously moving away from her. The truth is more complex than Captain Chin's expedition theorized. Yes, early humans did spread across the galaxy. Yes, they did establish colonies and modify local populations. But they didn't die out for natural causes. She gestured, and somehow the chamber's display system responded to her commands, showing new information that shouldn't have been in Station Kepler's databases. They were recruited. The display showed a timeline, but this one extended far beyond recorded galactic history. It showed wave after wave of civilizations rising and falling, with each cycle ending in the same pattern. The most advanced members of each species simply disappearing. Every few 100,000 years, the galaxy produces species that achieve a certain level of technological and cognitive development. When they reach that threshold, they receive an invitation to join something greater than themselves. Join what? Elder Counselor Vextahara rumbled. The real galactic civilization. The one that exists in dimensions parallel to this one. The one that's been harvesting the best minds and souls from this reality for millions of years. Captain Chin's expression had become carefully controlled. And you're here because? Because something unprecedented has happened. For the first time in galactic history, a species has reached the threshold without being modified by previous colonists. Earth's humans developed entirely naturally, which means you have genetic and psychological characteristics that the harvesters have never encountered before. Dr. Sarah Chin's smile became predatory. They want you very badly, Captain, but they also fear what you might represent, which is the possibility that natural evolution has finally produced something that can resist their recruitment methods. Zixi's small voice cut through the tension. Are you here to hurt the nice humans? Dr. Sarah Chun looked down at the child, and for a moment her expression became genuinely gentle. No, little one. I'm here to warn them, and to ask for their help. She turned back to address the full chamber. Because the harvesters aren't content with just recruiting individuals anymore. They've decided that natural evolution has become too unpredictable. They're planning to sterilize this entire reality and start over with a more controlled process. The silence that followed was absolute. Calera found herself holding Zixi protectively, her mind struggling to process the scale of what they were being told. How long do we have? Captain Chen asked. Dr. Sarah Chun checked a device that materialized on her wrist with technology that seemed far beyond anything in the chamber. Based on the quantum beacon signals that started broadcasting when your ship arrived at this station, about 72 hours before the first harvester ships arrive. And after that, Captain Chun, everyone in this reality stops existing. Except possibly you and your people, if you can do what millions of previous civilizations couldn't, which is fight back. The revelation that their entire reality was about to be erased had a peculiar effect on the assembled representatives. Rather than panic, a strange calm descended over the chamber as minds that had spent lifetimes dealing with complex political situations began to process what might be their final crisis. Calera found herself oddly comforted by Zixi's presence. Her daughter sat quietly, occasionally asking simple questions that helped the adults clarify their increasingly complex discussions. The child's innocence served as an anchor to sanity in a conversation that had moved far beyond the boundaries of normal experience. Dr. Sarah Chun had spent the past 6 hours providing detailed briefings on the nature of the harvesters and the parallel civilization that existed alongside their own reality. The information was both fascinating and terrifying. The parallel civilization isn't evil in any way we would understand, she explained, manipulating holographic displays that showed mathematical concepts most of the assembled beings couldn't fully grasp. They genuinely believe they're preserving the best aspects of consciousness from each reality before allowing natural entropy to reset the cycle. How generous of them, Captain Chen said dryly. And I assume they get to define what constitutes the best aspects. Precisely. They select individuals who meet their criteria for genetic, intellectual, and spiritual development. Those individuals are translated into the parallel reality where they continue to exist in a form that transcends physical limitations. Bioanalyst Cree Thun's manipulator arms moved frantically as he processed the implications. You're describing a systematic culling operation spanning millions of years. From their perspective, it's gardening. They allow realities to develop naturally until they produce their desired harvest. Then, they clear the field and plant new seeds. Elder Counselor Vextahar's massive form had remained still for so long that Calera had begun to wonder if the ancient being was even conscious. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the chamber. How many cycles have there been? Dr. Sarah Chun consulted her wrist device. This will be the 47th reset of this particular reality cluster. Each cycle lasts approximately 8 to 12 million years, depending on how quickly intelligent life develops. And how many individuals are typically harvested from an entire galactic civilization? Usually between 10 and 50,000. Just enough to preserve genetic diversity and maintain cultural continuity in the parallel reality. The mathematics were staggering. Calera's mind tried to calculate the number of beings who had lived and died across 46 previous cycles, all to provide a relative handful of survivors for each iteration. Mama, Zixi asked quietly, if they take some people away, do the rest just disappear? Dr. Sarah Chun nodded gravely. The reality reset is total. Everyone and everything that isn't harvested ceases to exist. No afterlife, no spiritual continuation, just nothing. That's horrible, the child said with the straightforward moral clarity that only children possessed. Yes, it is. Captain Chun had been studying the technical displays with Dr. Okafor and Dr. Martinez. Dr. Chun, you mentioned that natural humans might be able to resist the harvester recruitment methods. What exactly does that mean? The harvesters use a combination of quantum manipulation and consciousness transfer technology to extract individuals from this reality. The process requires the subject to have specific genetic markers that make their consciousness compatible with parallel reality physics. She highlighted sections of genetic code on her display. All the modified species in this galaxy carry these compatibility markers. They were engineered by the early human colonists to ensure that their descendants could be successfully harvested when the time came. Dr. Okafor looked up from her own analysis device. But natural Earth humans don't carry these markers. Correct. Your consciousness structure is incompatible with parallel reality physics. The harvesters can't recruit you using standard methods. Which means, Captain Chen prompted, which means they're planning to use non-standard methods. Instead of selective harvesting, they're going to attempt to capture your entire species through forcible translation of your planet. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Magistrate Corix's crystalline form resonated with harmonics that suggested extreme distress. You're saying they plan to steal Earth itself. Earth, its population, and everything in its solar system. They'll translate the entire package into parallel reality space, then modify the human population until they're compatible with the existing system. And everyone else? Everyone else will be eliminated during the reality reset, which will happen immediately after Earth is successfully captured. Counselor Yaira of the aquatic domains rose from her water-filled chair, her translated voice carrying a note of desperate determination. Then, we must help them resist. If humanity can avoid capture, perhaps the reset can be delayed or prevented entirely. Dr. Sarah Chun shook her head. The reset isn't triggered by the harvest completion. It's triggered by the detection of incompatible consciousness structures. The moment the harvesters confirmed that natural humans exist, they initiated the reset sequence. You mean we're all going to die because we met the humans? Elder Counselor Vextahar asked. You're all going to die because natural evolution finally produced something the harvesters can't control. Humanity represents a potential threat to their entire system. Zixi had been listening with the intense focus she always showed when trying to understand adult problems. Dr. Sarah, if you came from the future, can't you change what happens? The modified human smiled sadly at the child. I'm not from your future, little one. I'm from a future of a previous cycle. The harvesters rescued me just before my reality was reset, but they made mistakes in my modification process. I retained memories I wasn't supposed to keep. What kind of memories? Calera found herself asking. Memories of watching my reality die. Memories of seeing everyone I cared about simply cease to exist. And memories of learning that it had all happened before, over and over again. Dr. Sarah Chen's expression became hard. I've been planning my escape from the parallel reality for centuries. When I learned that natural humans have been detected in this cycle, I knew this was my chance to finally break the pattern. Captain Chen leaned forward. What do you need from us? I need you to do something that no species has ever attempted. I need you to attack the harvesters. The statement was so unexpected that several representatives began speaking at once. The idea of attacking beings with the power to manipulate reality itself seemed absurd. How would we even begin to fight them? Dr. Okafor asked. Dr. Sarah Chun smiled, and this time the expression was genuinely fierce. With the one weapon they've never encountered, pure, unmodified human stubbornness. She gestured, and the display showed technical specifications for devices that seemed to blend advanced technology with theoretical physics. The harvester's power comes from their ability to manipulate quantum states across dimensional boundaries. But their technology is designed to work with consciousness structures that follow predictable patterns. Natural human consciousness is chaotic, irrational, and fundamentally unpredictable. Are you saying our psychological flaws are actually advantages? Dr. Martinez asked. I'm saying that your ability to believe 6 impossible things before breakfast, combined with your tendency to charge directly at problems that logic says you can't solve, makes you immune to harvester psychological manipulation techniques. Captain Chun studied the technical displays. These devices you're showing us. Consciousness amplifiers. They'll allow natural humans to project their chaotic thought patterns across quantum dimensions. The effect should be similar to introducing random noise into a precisely calibrated system. And that will stop the reality reset. No, but it might disrupt the harvester fleet long enough for you to capture one of their ships. And if you can capture a ship, you can steal their dimensional translation technology. Bioanalyst Kree Thun's manipulator arms were moving so rapidly they were almost a blur. You're proposing that we try to escape this reality entirely? I'm proposing that we try to evacuate as many people as possible to uninhabited realities where the harvesters have no presence. It won't save this reality, but it might save some of its people. Elder Counselor Vextahar slowly raised his massive form from his resting position. How many people could be evacuated? Unknown. The harvester ships can translate entire planets, but we don't know how many ships we might be able to capture or how many trips we could make before the harvesters adapt to our tactics. So we might save a few thousand, a few million, or we might save everyone, or we might save no one. But it's the only plan that offers any hope at all. Zixi had been drawing patterns on her small datapad while listening to the adult conversation. She held up her creation, showing a simple picture of various alien figures standing together in what appeared to be spaceships. Mama, could we all live together on the new worlds? Calera looked at her daughter's artwork. Then, around the chamber at representatives from dozens of different species who were contemplating the end of everything they had ever known. Would you want a little starlight? Yes. It would be like the biggest family ever. Captain Chen looked at the child's picture, then at his own delegation. Dr. Chun, how long do we have to build your consciousness amplifiers? 68 hours and 17 minutes. And how many people do you think we might be able to save if everything goes perfectly? If we can capture multiple ships and organize effective evacuations? Maybe 10% of galactic population. 10% of a trillion beings. 10% of a trillion beings. Captain Chun stood up slowly, his expression resolving into something that Calera recognized as the look of a human who had decided to charge directly at an impossible problem. Then, we'd better get started. The final day of reality dawned with an efficiency that would have been impressive under different circumstances. Station Kepler had been transformed into a massive construction facility, with every available fabrication unit working to build consciousness amplifiers based on Dr. Sarah Chen's specifications. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that they were using the harvester's own quantum beacon signals to coordinate their resistance effort. Calera found herself appointed as the evacuation coordinator for the Outer Rim sectors, a position that required her to make decisions about which worlds would be prioritized if their desperate plan actually succeeded. The weight of choosing who might live or die sat heavily on her shoulders, but Zixi's presence continued to provide an anchor of simple moral clarity. Mama, why are you making lists of planets instead of lists of people? The child asked as she watched her mother work through complex population data. Because we don't have time to choose individuals, little starlight. We have to choose groups and hope we can save everyone in those groups. That doesn't seem fair. No, it's not fair at all. Captain Sean appeared in the doorway of their temporary quarters, his expression carrying the weight of someone who hadn't slept in 3 days. Calera, we need to talk. She followed him to the command center that had been established in the station's main conference chamber. The space was now filled with monitoring equipment, showing real-time data from across the galaxy. The approaching harvester fleet was clearly visible on long-range sensors, a collection of ships so vast that they appeared as a moving galaxy themselves. The consciousness amplifiers are ready, Chen reported to the assembled coordinators. Dr. Sarah Chun says they'll work, but we'll only get one chance. The moment we activate them, the harvesters will know exactly where we are and what we're trying to do. Dr. Okafor looked up from her analysis station. The volunteer crews are ready. We have natural humans piloting 12 captured shuttles, each equipped with amplifier arrays. The plan is to create enough quantum noise to disable the Harvester command ships long enough for boarding actions. What are the odds of success? Elder Counselor Vextahar asked. Dr. Sarah Chun, who had been making final adjustments to the amplifier systems, paused in her work. Based on theoretical projections, less than 5%. Based on my knowledge of human psychology, slightly better than even odds. Those aren't very comforting statistics, Magistrate Corix observed. They're the only statistics we have. Zixi had been following her mother around the command center, observing the frantic preparations with a curiosity that seemed to be her natural state. She tugged at Dr. Sarah Chin's modified uniform. Dr. Sarah, if we all go to new worlds, will we still remember each other? The modified human knelt down to bring herself to the child's eye level. What do you mean, little one? Will the crystalline people still remember how to sing when they walk? Will the water people still remember their pretty swimming patterns? Will Mama still remember how to change colors when she's happy? Dr. Sarah Chin's expression became thoughtful as she considered the child's question. Around the command center, the frantic activity gradually slowed as the adults began to listen. Those things are part of who you are, Dr. Sarah Chun said carefully. Moving to new worlds shouldn't change that. But what about the stories? What about the temples and the pretty artifacts and all the things that show us where we came from? Those will be lost, Zixi. When this reality ends, everything in it disappears. The child's expression became serious in the way that children's faces sometimes do when they're processing something that adults have missed. But, Dr. Sarah, if we're all family like Mama says, shouldn't we help each other remember the important things? Calera felt something click into place in her mind. Zixi, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that if we're going to live together on new worlds, we should bring the good things from the old worlds with us. Not just the people, but the things that make each family special. Dr. Okafor looked up from her station. She's talking about cultural preservation. If we're evacuating populations, we should also be evacuating their knowledge, their art, their history. The Harvester ships have massive data storage capabilities, Dr. Sarah Chin mused. If we could capture those systems intact. Captain Chin's expression shifted from desperate determination to something that might have been hope. We could preserve everything. Not just the people, but their entire civilizations. Bioanalyst Cree Thun's manipulator arms began moving in what Calera had learned indicated excitement. The consciousness amplifiers could be modified to capture not just biological patterns, but information patterns as well. We could digitally archive entire planetary databases. How long would that take? Elder Counselor Vextahar asked. Too long, Dr. Sarah Chun said immediately. We don't have the resources to modify the amplifiers and maintain their effectiveness against the Harvesters. Zixi looked around the command center at all the discouraged adult faces. What if we don't modify anything? What if we just ask everyone to remember really hard? What do you mean? Her mother asked. When I want to remember something important, I think about it really hard and tell myself the story over and over until it sticks. What if everyone on all the ships just spent the whole trip telling their stories to each other? The simplicity of the idea was staggering. Counselor Yaira of the Aquatic Domains was the first to understand the implications. Living cultural transmission. Instead of trying to preserve data, we preserve the knowledge through the people themselves. Each evacuation ship becomes a mobile library, Magistrate Corix added, his crystalline form resonating with harmonics that suggested growing excitement. Dr. Okafor was already running calculations. If we organized systematic storytelling sessions during the evacuation flights, we could preserve the essential elements of every civilization. The survivors would carry their entire cultural heritage with them to the new worlds. Captain Chin looked at Zixi with something approaching awe. You want to turn the evacuation into the largest storytelling session in galactic history. Why not? The child asked. Stories are important. They're how we know who we are. Dr. Sarah Chun stood up slowly, her ancient eyes showing something that looked like wonder. In 400 years of planning revenge against the Harvesters, I never once thought about what we would do after we escaped. I only thought about survival. And now? Calera asked. Now I'm thinking about what kind of galaxy we want to build when we get to the other side. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of modified preparations. The evacuation plan expanded to include cultural preservation coordinators, storytelling schedules, and systematic knowledge transfer protocols. Every ship would carry not just refugees, but the living memory of entire civilizations. Zixi had somehow become the unofficial coordinator of the children's storytelling groups, organizing young representatives from every species to learn and teach the most important stories from their peoples. Watching her daughter work with alien children to preserve the cultural heritage of a dying galaxy filled Calera with a pride that transcended the fear of their desperate circumstances. The Harvester fleet arrived exactly when Dr. Sarah-Chun had predicted. The command center's main display showed ships that defied easy description. They appeared to be constructed from crystallized space-time itself, their surfaces reflecting dimensions that human eyes couldn't properly process. There were hundreds of them, each one larger than most space stations. Consciousness amplifiers are charged and ready, Captain Chun reported from his position aboard the lead attack shuttle. All volunteer crews report ready for deployment. Evacuation fleets are standing by, Calera reported from her coordination station. Cultural preservation protocols are active. Dr. Sarah Chun made final adjustments to the amplifier control systems. Remember, we only get one shot at this. The moment we activate the amplifiers, every Harvester ship in the fleet will know exactly what we're trying to do. Are we sure about this? Elder Counselor Vextahar asked, his massive form somehow conveying uncertainty despite his size. Zixi looked up from her position, coordinating the children's groups. Elder Counselor, are you scared? The ancient being considered the question seriously. Yes, little one. I am very scared. That's okay. Mama gets scared sometimes too, but she still does the right things. And what is the right thing in this situation? Taking care of our family, Zixi said with the absolute certainty that only children possessed. All of our family. Captain Chen's voice came through the communication system from his attack shuttle. All units, this is lead shuttle. Beginning attack run in 30 seconds. Around the command center, representatives from dozens of species took their positions at evacuation coordination stations. Each would guide the rescue of their own people while simultaneously helping to preserve the cultural heritage of everyone else. 20 seconds came Chen's voice. Calera reached down and took her daughter's small hand. Whatever happens, little Starlight, I'm proud of you for helping everyone remember their stories. 10 seconds. The stories will remember us too, Mama. 5 seconds. Activating consciousness amplifiers now. The effect was immediate and dramatic. On the display screens, the Harvester ships began to flicker and distort as waves of chaotic human consciousness crashed against their precisely ordered quantum systems. Several of the massive vessels simply stopped moving, their navigation systems apparently overwhelmed by the random noise patterns generated by 12 humans thinking very hard about absolutely nothing in particular. It's working, Dr. Okafor shouted over the alarms that were now blaring throughout the command center. The Harvester command ships are going offline. Boarding teams go. Captain Chen's voice carried across the communication channels as the human shuttles dove toward the disabled Harvester vessels. What followed was the most chaotic hour in galactic history. 12 human boarding teams, protected by consciousness amplifiers that made them essentially invisible to Harvester detection systems, captured 3 of the massive ships. The evacuation fleets launched immediately, racing toward the disabled vessels while the amplifier effects lasted. The first evacuation ship to reach a captured Harvester vessel was filled with crystalline refugees and their children's storytelling groups. As they boarded the alien ship, their harmonics filled the corridors with songs that told the history of their people. The second ship carried aquatic domain evacuees, who immediately began sharing water dances that preserved their cultural mathematics. The third carried representatives from a dozen different species, all frantically teaching each other the essential stories of their civilizations. How many did we get? Dr. Sarah Chun asked as the reports started coming in. first ship successfully translated to uninhabited reality in the Andromeda equivalent, came the report from the captured harvester vessel. Beginning return trip for second load. Second ship has encountered harvester resistance. Fighting through. Third ship is loading evacuees. Estimate departure in 15 minutes. The pattern continued for 6 hours. The captured harvester ships made trip after trip, each time carrying refugees and their stories to empty realities where they could rebuild their civilizations. The cultural preservation protocols worked exactly as Zixi had envisioned, with each ship becoming a traveling library of galactic heritage. By the time the Harvester fleet had adapted to the consciousness amplifier attacks and begun mounting effective countermeasures, the evacuation effort had saved nearly 40 million beings from across the galaxy. Not everyone, not even close to everyone, but far more than anyone had dared to hope. The final ship to depart carried Calera, Zixi, and the core coordination team. As their captured harvester vessel translated across dimensional boundaries toward a new reality, Zixi pressed her face to the observation port to watch their old universe disappear. "Are you sad, little starlight?" Calera asked. "A little bit, but also excited." Excited about what? About all the new stories we're going to make together. Behind them, in the ship's vast corridors, the survivors of a dozen civilizations were still teaching each other the songs, dances, mathematics, and stories that defined their peoples. They had lost their worlds, but they had saved something more important. They had saved the memory of who they were. And in the new realities they would build together, those memories would become the foundation for something unprecedented in galactic history. A truly unified civilization built not on the hierarchy of creation, but on the simple recognition that all sentient beings were family. It was, as Zixi had pointed out, the biggest family ever. And they all remembered each other's stories.